Hi there. My name is Risa Shimoda, and I'm the Executive Director of the River Management Society. And we're here today to talk about paying to play. Who should pay for river access? In 2022, RMS reached out to river managers across the country to understand watercraft management and tracking systems used by waterway administrators for non-motorized craft. This included learning how they pay for and maintain and support non-motorized or hand-carried river access sites, whether or not individual watercraft are registered, and if fees are charged by their state, themselves, other jurisdictions. We also asked if and how they track the demographics of non-motorized craft users. So this presentation will describe our findings that may help you chart a course of action as you respond to the opportunity of supporting paddle sports as it continues to grow. We need to thank the Oregon State Marine Board because it is their surveys of state folks around the country in 2013 and 2016 that was the basis for the survey that we used last year. So thank you guys so much. But we did this study last year. The majority of survey respondents were state folks who worked on access, 65%. Over half of them worked on some kind of public education. About a quarter were law enforcement folks also, or their responsibility included law enforcement, and a little bit less than a quarter were involved in somehow with registering boats. Well, we found out that, as we thought, or you might know, there's no one-size-fits-all for non-motorized, registration, as well as permitting or titling. The two numbers that you see there reflect the nationwide data that you might see in a Coast Guard report, like their annual fatality survey, versus the representation in our group of respondents. And they're lower. All of those are lower, or the first two are lower registration and titling because of more of a river orientation, and then the final one is a lot higher because of the same thing. I think importantly, in a nationwide survey that the Coast Guard would conduct includes a great number of those non-power boats are sailboats, and those are much less a factor in anything that we do. So, not surprising, this is the type of craft that the folks who responded to us deal with. So, paddling continues to grow, right? Almost 19 million people went kayaking at least once in 2021. That's sampling folks all the way through, diehard experts. There's a skew towards male, and actually it's when at the beginner level, it's maybe 50-50 male-female. As you get into year 2, year 3, year 5, and levels of expertise that are, experienced or expert, the the split changes to where at the expert level, it's more like 75% men and 25% women. However, women are a big part of this community. And sadly, we found that 17% of our respondents, again, this is that 50 people who responded, so that they collect user demographics. So this is a photo that you might see in the Waterway Management Guide, 3rd edition, that we were lucky enough to work on. And we got this from the state of Florida. It's a harbor boat access site in Jacksonville, Florida. All non-motorized except for a couple out there in the harbor. But you could see the variation of users, the variety of users, and this is not uncommon in sites across the country. So In our respondents, or among our respondents, we heard different types of this topic, different sides of this topic. User conflicts are an issue for river managers. In Illinois, as there have been kind of burgeoning issues in other states, paddleable rivers remain legally the private property of riparian landowners. That is the case in only a few states, but it's an issue. If you have what you think is a public waterway, because it would be in other states and it's not. Kansas has identified public rivers as water trails and therefore open to the public. Some of those people want to move to Illinois. And then the demographic thing, 17% do track demographics of those we responded to, what we talked to. That means 83% don't. And a third of the respondents offered or planned a user or public safety program. That's not a lot. So look at this 2021 outdoor participation graph. And the 4 lines are kind of penetration by ethnic group. 59% of Asian Pacific Islanders said that they participated in an outdoor activity. This is not boating, but just outdoor activity. A higher percentage than Caucasian, white, non-Hispanic. Hispanic, almost half, and over a third African American. So that's just like interesting to know if you want to know your audience, right? If you don't measure that, you don't know that. And each of those groups, there are several subsets of each of those groups that you might want to either accommodate or get to know more, and certainly understand if members of those communities are visiting your river. Another aspect of the growth of paddle sports is over 37 million participants engaged in paddle sports in 2020, according to the Outdoor Foundation. That's the same organization that provided the data we just looked at, but that was all outdoor activities. So there are lots of new paddlers coming in and lots of accidents because these people are new users. They're not familiar with what they're doing or the conditions or the variability and so forth. So from among the folks we were lucky enough to interview in our survey, after our survey, a couple folks specifically mentioned, like Shane Belson in Washington, they have focused on general boating access, but for fishing, and the emphasis has been on motorized users. So they're taking a look at non-motorized as a planning project. And then in Illinois, because of the issues about riparian rights among landowners, there's movement afoot in Illinois to at least establish easements. So secure funding for all of this, whether it's a state agency building access or developing safety programs or pursuing easements, all this remains not secured by a fund, if you will. No federal system really exists to ensure funding or standardized management practices. States are kind of on their own to apply for grant money where they can or distribute what they get as they see fit. And, not but, there are some states who do apply earnings from a state program towards the boaters that use them, the non-powered folks that use them. And just to focus on one awesome state, again, our friends at the Oregon State Marine Board, they initiated a fee in 2018. As you see, it's cool because it's per boat that's being used. So you don't have to put a sticker on your boat and only use that one. Or if you own 10 boats, you can get one pass. And it's to use whenever you use whatever boat. So it's use as opposed to the vehicle. It's not a huge part. It's 5% of their total income. And they're not funded by the state. But those funds are all returned to boaters. And the grants that they provide go anywhere from a repair, an enlargement of an access, signage, or I remember a couple of years ago there was a safety video that was produced in Spanish. So all these awesome programs go right back to the users who are paying those fees. Washington, also a progressive state, they have a number of programs to where there are funds. I don't know if ample is exactly the right word, but there are opportunities to fund access points. The Lands Access Pass, actually, it's not just for boating or not just for river, but it's the 4th largest revenue generating state parks pass in the country, second to New York, Florida, and California. Even that one, however, said they were struggling when the pandemic hit. So they're not like rolling in dough with, buying cigars for each other to celebrate how much money they have. They're still stressed because of the growth of popularity of outdoor sports and non-motorized boating specifically. And there are federal programs. Land and Water Conservation Fund goes to states. The state SCORP, state plan, needs to have in it the priority for us non-motorized watercraft use, and if there is, then you can apply. So it's sort of there. It varies by state a lot, and so you're not just guaranteed about walking in and knowing you're going to get money for an enhanced access, I'd say. And just another example, hydropower mitigation, there are generous funds that exist in a hydropower relicensing or settlement as a result of the interest for a portage route, camping area, enlarged access site amenities, whatever, large parking area. You have to be in the process and know who's talking about what and how much, where you are able to have the input in order to identify that that's something that you can ask for as a state agency or federal agency partner if you're involved, or a local NGO, local stakeholder group. So it is there. It's just not like there's no dotted line to the funds. So you still have to know quite a bit, and it's not guaranteed. Just in case we forget, there's a lot of people going to the river. This is a great put-in shot from the Deschutes. So what can we learn from an 85-year-old? That's not me yet, quite yet. But it is the age of the Pittman-Robertson Act, which was put into place in 1937. It's also the Federal Aid and Wildlife Restoration Act. In 1932, Congress authorized an excise tax on firearms and ammunition that went into the general treasury of the U.S. And then 5 years later, with the passage of this act, those excise taxes were designated to go to game agencies for the states, and the exclusive use was to fund wildlife habitat and improved hunter access. The benefits of this program to game departments and sports folks, sporting goods retailers and manufacturers, as well as non-consumptive users, people who are just driving through or doing paintings on these protected lands, have been abundant. Today, compared to that list of opportunities, every state has a deer season. Folks in Missouri have 100 days of hunting for deer. That's a lot. Elk hunters in Colorado, 100 days. Wisconsin, 130 days you can hunt for grouse. South Dakota has become the pheasant hunting capital of the world. Who would know unless you're a pheasant hunter? And I think about this every time I hear about how cool it is that archery only, muzzleloader only seasons are held in nearly every state. It might be a week, it might be 2 days. That certainly varies. But this is all a result of project by project by project in states being funded by the funds that are collected from the excise tax. A few years later, well, in 50, a similar act was passed called Dingell-Johnson as the Sport Fish Restoration Act. And the focus of this programmatically was fishing, conservation of habitat, recreation environments, species, and also getting people out to do more fishing. Again, it's a manufacturer's excise tax on specific items that have been identified as fishing, related. And it's consistent. It's reflective of 2020. There's a little bump from the pandemic, but it's consistent over time. And is apportioned to states. So every state has need to certify that they're qualified to request this because they have, in this case, the sport fishing facilities, staffing, and so forth. And they ask for their share. And even Washington, D.C., District of Columbia gets $1 million or so. So the program cycle of success is pretty straightforward. Manufacturers pay an excise tax and custom duties on products that are made overseas. When they come in, they have to pay something on them. It goes to the fund. The fund is administered by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Grants are allocated to the states. There are new opportunities, enhanced opportunities, more choices, like muzzle loading season. And the industry benefits are more sales of products and then more areas and species protected and conserved. So in 2019, the National Boating Safety Advisory Council, knowing that these two acts had been so successful, looked at the growth of paddle sports, human-powered watercraft, and they didn't just discover this, they'd known for some time, like decades, that the incidence of accidents and fatalities have grown. You have 500,000 people that were registered, millions of non-registered, non-power boaters out there. They're spending Coast Guard money helping them out, maybe providing education, but also rescuing them. And they're paying with trust fund dollars, so they're kind of want to fuss about it, and rightfully so. So they just said, if there is an excise tax, this is where we think it should be going. Access, education, law enforcement, boating safety programs. And I don't know if it was directly a function of this, but last year in December, there was a report completed by the General Accounting Office on this topic: how vessel users contribute and benefit from a federal trust fund. It came about because stakeholder discussions about the equitability of contributions to this trust fund were continuing to happen. So they just looked at all the data that they could find, reports of non-motorized and motorized vessels, the extent to which funds are spent on the activities of the users of those vessels, and the extent to which it's been used for boating access and safety activities in general. They found not a lot that was surprising, really. They might have been surprised at the number of non-motorized vessels. Motorized vessels have been counted a long time, and because the trust fund gets money from them, it's been easier to count them. They saw how much was given to the Sportfish Foundation. They saw that graph that we just saw a while ago, how much comes from sales, excise tax, gasoline tax, and so forth. And notably with boating and gas tax, 49% of the funding comes from gas taxes, a portion of which is not small boats, so it would be a portion to kind of non-motorized. But after all that, they interviewed state folks from 5 states, federal folks, NGOs, manufacturers, and they couldn't figure out exactly the extent of what non-motorized use contributed, needed, how much money was spent on non-motorized, because it's just, there's no plan for it. There is no act that's designating funding to go right to that fund and to be spent on non-motorized. This is all pretty new, relatively new, maybe 30 years, relative in the whole grand scheme of things. So what would happen if we, took our model that we have and tried to replicate this excise tax? This is going to look pretty familiar because it's almost the same thing. Manufacturers and importers pay excise tax or custom duties. Goes to a trust fund. Interior allocates the funds. States allocate those granted funds. The public gets access, education, clean water, more experiences, particularly for new users in this category. And then the industry benefits full circle by selling more of all the above. The excise tax in other categories, hunting and fishing categories, is 10%. So that, let's just say it's 10% also. Grantees are state folks. States get to give the money away. NGOs could apply for it. So the amount of the size of the industry is over $500 million. And so if you take 10% of that, that's $50 million. And at super rough, and it's probably not completely accurate, but that's what can be counted. Now, the reason why it's not accurate, it's probably bigger, is several of the kayak companies are private. So, who knows what that is. So it's not like the magnitude of the hunting and fishing licenses, but if you had a match, say a 25% match, then your 500 goes up to 625 million or 62.5 million, and you have some money that would be happily applied for and utilized by states, including NGO partners. So this tax, this paddle for access, stewardship, and safety tax, could support the things that we're finding are in need of support. Safety, education, research, access, stewardship, management, including water quality, which is becoming more and more of an issue for recreation as people are both going into, as recreation is being promoted for urban areas and in rivers that have become more polluted or simply weren't used often by recreational users. Apportionment, maybe based on the river miles you manage, acres of water, population, visitorship, projected visitorship, and again awarded to states that would distribute through a competitive process. This is all a guess. This doesn't exist anywhere except on this slide. And then you'd ask for a match. Hopefully your money is available for a period of time. It's not too strict in case your project takes a little while to get going. You have to be certified. You can't be District of Columbia and say you have 1,000,000 miles of river. Law enforcement, public relations should be eligible because they're a critical part of managing rivers. But you can't go use this to make money. This is similar to the other two acts. So this is not kind of new stuff. That's actually it for my presentation. Here are a few resources that are on the River Management Society website. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. If you're at the symposium in San Antonio, I'll be running around like a nut. If it's outside of the symposium time period, please reach out. Here's my email address. And I'm around. So thank you so much for participating. And thank you for your interest in this topic. And this is just the beginning. Be on the lookout for more information because this is a topic that will continue to be important.